So we'll get started. Thank you very much for joining our session, and great to see everyone again at CFCamp. It's been too long. My name's Alex Skinner. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pixelate, and today I'm joined by Dominic Watson, who is CTO, and yeah, you may see him dancing later. Started Pixelate around 20 odd years ago. Been working with CF since the Allaire days. I used to teach the Allaire curriculum for fast track and advanced, and there was a performance analysis and tuning, which was quite fun as well. I enjoyed Spectra immensely for a very, very brief amount of time. And yeah, I'm an avid Cold Fusion fan and Lucee developer. So a little bit about Pixelate. So as I said, started in 2001. We're around 70 people. We're a distributed team, much like everybody these days. I counted on my fingers and toes. I was like, oh yeah, how many Lucee developers do we actually have? So we have around 30 Lucee developers. We are 100% powered by Lucee as a business, and part of the talk today was to talk about how we use it to drive our business, not just in terms of the products and services that we produce, but also how we use it internally, how we use it for everything from HR management, project management, as well as some fun stuff around orchestration. We're on a little bit of a journey as a business. So we started off life as a services business, like a lot of web agencies do, and we decided that actually product is a lot more fun. So we have been transitioning to more of a product and platform business, and as such, we have 3 services teams and a platform team. And we produce the Preside platform, which I'm going to talk a little bit about now. We predominantly, as a business, work with membership organizations, so we have a couple of hundred membership organizations that we work with. And the wonderful thing about membership organizations, if you're going to get excited about this subject, is that there are membership associations for everything. You know, every industry, every walk of life, and so therefore you're able to solve very similar problems for similar organizations.
There are membership organizations for membership organizations.
Yeah, there are.
Clients. What's the name? The Association
of
Association
the Association of Association Executives.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gets, and they are of course a client. So well reminded, Dom. Bottom right hand corner. It's a little bit of a rough agenda. Timing-wise, you may have more questions or find certain things more interesting, so happy to dive into detail and take questions really as we're going. So we're going to talk a little bit about our love affair with Lucee, how we have been moving to the cloud and what that means to us as a business. We're going to look at some orchestration demos in terms of how we use GitLab, Kubernetes APIs to sort of deal with our sort of overall estate. We're going to talk about performance monitoring. That isn't a nap midway through. That will make sense later. So that's how we're using hibernation and the ability to sort of scale up and scale down with a bit more of how we use Lucee. Then we're going to talk about translation memory, and got to have AI in there, so we snuck that in there as well. And then the boring subject of sort of security and compliance, and yeah, our approach to that, and some of the tooling that we've built there. So let's start off by talking a little bit about our love affair with Lucee, and then we can look a little bit at what the Preside platform is. So yeah, we've been involved with Lucee now for really since the inception, and Raylo before that. Pixelate as a business stopped really using sort of mainstream Cold Fusion in version 8. So I think version 8 came out and I was somewhat disillusioned. And then I went on a little bit of a ride around sort of bluedragon.net, OpenBlueDragon, various other sort of outposts until we found Raylo and obviously Lucee, and have stuck there. We are supporters of Lucee. Lucee is a fundamental component of our business. It drives absolutely everything. We are committed to make sure that it thrives. This never got mentioned earlier, but I think it's worth noting there are no full-time developers on Lucee, and if you consider that for a second, what they managed to produce is just amazing. So, you know, if there were more members, if there were more supporters, they could definitely do more. The Preside platform is Lucee only, and yeah, we have no intention of making it work on ACF. It doesn't make sense for our business. Lucee 6 is massively exciting. I've been, as Zach said, a sort of a strong sort of reminder of sort of the importance of Lucee 6, and yeah, really, we've tested Lucee and are very happy with the direction of travel there.
Did Zach cover the fact that he works for Pixel 8?
Yeah, so Zach actually works as a technical lead at Pixel 8 as well when he's not at Lucee. So obviously we're very close to Lucee in all manner of forms. The two things we're excited about with the Lucee 6 is predominantly the Java integration, but also the single context as well, for the fact that we deploy on Docker. And yeah, you can get involved with Lucee at opencollective.com/Lucee. In terms of Preside platform. So I wrote the very first version of Preside as a CMS platform back in the day. It was a commercial platform. We sold it. Dom came along in 2012, tolerated my code base for a pretty short period of time, and then suggested we rewrite it from the ground up. And when we rewrote it and open sourced it. And rather than building a content management platform, we built a application building platform and then built a CMS with it. So fundamentally, it's worth saying that Preside is an open source platform for building business applications. You can build a CMS, and it has a CMS within it. But we see it used for building everything from event tech platforms, membership association management, which is obviously commercial modules. There's a Vietnamese dental practice software company that builds on top of Preside. And we use it for building applications for running and organizing our business. Commercially, the main people that we compete with is Dynamics and Salesforce. So when we're up against, in the sort of commercial space, it tends to be those two platforms.
I guess it's kind of interesting to say what's going on here. This is a dashboard using our open source dashboard extension. And the first thing it says for the logged in user is how well they're logging their time. So it's not really a good demo of how that should be.
Yeah. So yeah, we integrate into a whole series of different platforms and bring this together as a sort of white cat stroking, sort of run the business type platform. So everything from project management, HR, booking leave, managing our infrastructure, monitoring timesheeting, and some people are better than others at that, but also things like our internal intranet and wiki and things like that in terms of a piece of content being launched internally and making sure that people read it. And I haven't read some of our policies. Communicating in Slack, for one, in terms of that policy, which explains a lot. So yeah, essentially, Preside as a platform allows you to build data objects, to build data layers, and then we solve all of those common problems in terms of CRUD, in terms of permissioning, in terms of creating forms. We have a rules engine that allows us to sort of interrogate the relationships between data. And as such, when we look at these examples later, you're going to see a commonality. So for building business applications really, really quickly and solving sort of common problems, that's really what Preside is about. So in terms of the journey that we've gone on around setup and deployment, so when Dom joined, we had something like 170 servers. We were deploying in sort of virtual private servers. And we were using things like Subversion, which he quickly kicked into touch.
And deployment was using Beyond Compare, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, he had like the SVN checked out directory here, and then the production, and then Beyond Compare. Nothing could go wrong.
Yeah,
on the production server. Yeah.
And so that journey has really moved forward from obviously through into Git, and this sort of represents sort of an early pipeline type approach. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So that transition for us was getting to something that was automated. I mean, we were using Beanstalk with SVM. That would move to Git, and Beanstalk had some pipeline stuff going on. But we were still VMs, so we would be deploying using a bash script that built the application and then did like an SCP to copy things across over secure shell. And then this is a kind of first iteration of the same thing, but in GitLab. Anybody else who use GitLab? Who think it's just the bee's knees?
Yep.
I think it's so fantastic. And anyway, yeah, and so then eventually getting around to kind of figuring out Kubernetes and using GitLab as the abstraction in front of Kubernetes so our developers don't have to worry about it. And this is a pipeline for an application. There's a few actually missing steps. There's something where the application, if it needs translations, pushes all its properties up into our translations manager, but more on that. We've got vulnerability scanning, which we'll cover. Anyway, a pipeline that ends up deploying into Kubernetes is where we're at today.
So that was GitLab. So from an orchestration standpoint, we built out functionality within our platform so one of the challenges we have is we're not a multi-tenanted platform. So we do support multi-tenancy. If we're building applications for customers, we support the idea of having multiple sites, multiple languages within a single tenant. But because we're deploying within Kubernetes, all of our clients get their own individual containers. They may have something, we have something like 300 total extensions, 70 that are kind of deployed more often. And so one of the things that we do, we use CommandBox, we use ForgeBox for our publicly hosted extensions. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you did on the private side of things?
Yeah, so Preside for everything, right? Like, it's really great and easy to build an API in Preside. It has its own REST framework and an extension that makes it even easier using that REST framework to build REST endpoints on data objects. But yes, so we use MIS as a ForgeBox endpoint for packages. So all of our private packages are published into MIS. This application, this is our intranet, basically. Yeah, so then our builds, if the CommandBox package, the box.json package begins with pixelate : it's going to end up getting directed to MIS to figure out where to download it and version it. So that's really nice, keeps things segmented. In GitHub, we've got published some GitHub actions to kind of publish to ForgeBox, and all of our open source projects do that. And as well, if you do, if you're ever using Preside, if you ever come around to using Preside, there's a whole extension system. We've got some CommandBox commands where you can write a new extension. It gives you those GitHub pipelines as part of that, so that kind of getting into ForgeBox is really easy. Yep. But yeah, so it's worth knowing we've got that separation.
From an orchestration standpoint, we built this thing called Mission Control. So, for example, this allows us to set up and deploy new applications. So if I come in here and I just say I want to build a new application, so I can go to Pixelate. This is coming from our CRM. I'm not going to call it CFCamp because that will upset Mishi. So CFCamp 2, I can choose the different applications that I have. I can go through a series of workflow steps. CFCamp demo. So I can go through a series of steps. I can select the extensions and I can select the feature flags that I'm particularly interested in terms of the application that I'm building. I can then talk about, let's just select a whole series of combinations that have never been tried before. What can go wrong? So as we go through this, we then look at what environments I want, configure the UI, and then I can talk about which regions we want to host things in. So which cluster are we putting things in? Is it hosted in the UK? It would be nice if we just had one EU cluster, but Boris messed that one up, didn't he? So yeah, so we've got an EU cluster, a UK cluster, and then we sort of talk about which memory profiles and what node types and things like that we want. And we hit deploy, and magic stuff happens. So let's confuse the sales team
so as
in
you're
Slack channel.
Typing away, so this is using a closed source extension that is like a workflow where we can define workflows in YAML files. It gives us this progress bar and is a nice way to develop. Ooh, that's fine. It failed to create a Sentry project. This, what we're seeing here, is actually part of Preside, this kind of task progress. We do that really often if we've got like rather than submit and go and sit and wait for the request to finish for 2 minutes. We can go create an ad hoc task that's a background task, and we can give it a UI for a user, and they can watch it, and they can go away and not watch it if they want. But yeah, that's all core open source Preside.
Yeah, and if I go to here and I search for CFCamp 2, you can see that that's created the corresponding repositories. And really what this is about is, you know, although from a SaaS standpoint, I call it SaaS Plus, which is just marketing that makes sense to people when I talk to them. But say, you know, ultimately we have a platform. We roll out updates for our clients on the platform, but nobody wants to change the colors and slap on the logo as it relates to websites. We want to have visual flexibility. We want to be able to have development flexibility. And so by having this sort of orchestration, I could, of course, go to Mishi's CFCamp site. And, you know, I could change it live, for example. So we could, maybe not, but you could basically apply a hotfix, or we could go in there and we could change the navigation style, or, you know, change the different config options and things like that. So it's not just about setup, it's also about being able to roll out updates. When you've got a couple of hundred running applications in different regions and various other things, we want the ability to be able to say we found a vulnerability, or we've got a hotfix that we want to make. So we want to be able to go select all, go, and magic stuff.
And the evolution of this is kind of that, like Linux tooling, right? You have Linux commands that are like short, sharp tools, and then eventually someone puts a UI on the top of them. So a lot of that stuff. This has only been around for less than a year, and before that it was a lot of scripts that developers could just run and would do the same thing, and then it's like, okay, let's build a UI on top of it, and kind of slowly improve that, and there's more we can do here.
Yeah. So in this particular example, you can see that this is the live Pixelate website that's both in UAT and production, and you can see that it's hosting on a large profile. You can see that there's a hotfix available, so may as well do that. Direct to production, why not? Go. So what that's going to do, well, you explain what it's going to do, because you wrote it.
It's upgrading the version in box.json for this, and perfect, it's got a problem. Making a commit, which is another reason I love GitLab. The APIs are really good, so we can do a lot of stuff without having a developer get involved. It had an issue because there's a merge conflict, and you can never automatically deal with that, but that's fine. You can actually push that to production now. We do that for hotfixes. We're also telling the user, in this case, we've got a new version of our base product that's actually like a meta package of 70 other extensions and products, and we're telling them there's a new version, but we won't allow you to do what we just did for the hotfix there, because you like completely like going from I don't know what WordPress is at the moment, like WordPress 6 to 7 example. A click of a button is probably not a good idea. So now you hit deploy, it's triggered the GitLab pipeline, and pushing translations into Translation Manager, doing a bunch of stuff. That's going to take 10 minutes, so we'll
come back to that.
We'll wait and watch that.
Yeah. So monitoring was a big part of what we needed, and obviously there's great tooling with things like Fusion Reactor. But Dom, do you want to talk a little bit about our drive, and you talk over it? So in this particular case, we're pushing all the things to Grafana.
Nope.
Okay, well then.
Who knows why Alex is wrong? Okay, yeah. So Grafana has nothing in it. Grafana is fantastic, but it queries other things. So in terms of pushing and pull things, so we use for our metrics, we use Prometheus. Who's Prometheus? Really phenomenal piece of kit. I guess it'll be you're on the Warp. On Warp?
Mm-hmm.
Could you go to like pixelate.com/metrics? Is that what it is, the endpoint?
Nope.
No, what's it called? Oh, it is. You're not allowed. Never mind. Okay, so we use Prometheus. We have, I think, we hold data for 2 weeks in Prometheus. All of our Kubernetes apps and all the pods are continually producing metrics. Prometheus is sucking them out. So there's like one bit of configuration, and then we never have to worry about it. And that gets deployed, and metrics start getting collected. And I think we're around 120 gigabyte database for 2 weeks of data that then keeps rotating, and it works, and it's fantastic. So if you're not into Prometheus, it's a time series database for metrics. So you have a metric name that can have a bunch of tags and a value. There's a really easy output format for any of your apps to go, hey, here's some metrics.
Question about Prometheus. What extension you have built in the extension for Fusion that pushes the data?
Yeah, so there's...
Yeah, sure.
No. I mean, it's we don't particularly. So we use for all the Lucee applications, we just use there's a Prometheus Java agent, so that's in there. But then on top of that, for the application level, we have our own software that's querying Preside and Coldbox caches, which we'll see. And yeah, just publishes its own application metrics on a metrics endpoint. I mean, it's really straightforward. I mean, I'm not sure, I don't have anything to open source there because it's kind of pixelate specific as it is, but it's really straightforward.
Yeah. We could certainly document it, just to give
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next thing is, so all the monitoring. And
Well, let's take a look at the app dashboard. We haven't got time.
No.
Oh, but it's so cool.
Yeah. We're happy to show. Oh,
Okay.
we could show the app dashboard. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll do that very quickly.
So just as an example of what you're saying. Yeah.
Specific additional metrics
Yeah.
apart from standard one that Prometheus provides, like usually there's a standard.
So if we built our own. I built all the own dashboards because the standard ones kind of went so far, and then we're like, yeah, okay, it's not quite right. But so this is an application running with multiple nodes. We can see. So it's got CPU. So that's a lot of standard metrics. So like CPU, memory usage is all like out of box stuff. And then if we take a section down, so this is the Nginx stuff is coming actually from Elasticsearch and Elk. So logs going out there. Then we keep going down. Sockets and sessions. So we've got like the WebSockets aren't on this website, but active sessions, that's coming out of Lucee. Database, we then have like a database metrics per user, so we can see that. And then we've got like Preside specific stuff. So we've got like caches. So that's the cache box metrics. So all the caches and how efficient they are. Task Manager, that's Preside specific. Is there a queues section? Where's that gone? Oh yeah, the queues. So if someone sends out 200,000 emails, we can see that like queuing and doing all of the stuff, yeah. And that's been a really nice evolution and constantly building new ones. We've got all sorts of other ones. So Sentry, which is great for error reporting.
We're going to look
can't
at
really
that.
cross query it, so we created a dashboard that is just plugged straight into the database and we can query across everything. And then when we use that to go, oh, there's a bunch of invalid syntax database errors. We should look at those. Those might be a SQL injection, and so that gets like alerted up.
For imagery sizing, we use something called VIPs, so that's wrapped up into a little lightweight Preside application that basically handles image resizing across the cluster. One of the nice things about that is that it allows us to keep our pod sizes that little bit smaller for individual applications and for sort of things outside the JVM to be handled externally. Sleeping go night-night. So this is really around two things. One of the things that we did in the journey of moving from sort of servers to running in containers is previously our development servers were these large, big shared boxes. I say shared, not with any other companies, but we would have these massive boxes, massive Linux boxes, and then obviously what we found once we started deploying containers was that the infrastructure to run the version of your application with its memory profile and CPU in test, in staging, in live was roughly the same. So that was suboptimal from a cost standpoint, but also from a kind of practical, we'd like to save the planet as well. If something's not being used, then there's really no point it running. So we built this application effectively to allow applications that are idling or not doing anything to report themselves to a little service that will then call the
Preside app,
which is a Preside app, obviously, which is then calls the Kubernetes API and then sort of effectively puts the application to sleep. And then we created this UI for customers to be able to come along to the hidden UAT, click a button, and then effectively, redeploy the applications. And you can see the net effect.
Who's using Kubernetes? Enough people to, yeah, okay. So what that does is so each of our applications has a namespace, it's got a service, a deployment, and an ingress. And all that thing does is it takes the deployment out, and it switches the service to repoint at a single service that just serves that hibernation page. So all of these apps then, they've got no pods running, and all their services are still there, and all the ingresses are still there, and it just goes, oh, and I'm now getting served by this little app. So if you want to do something similar, that's kind of the approach, and it does work really nicely.
But you can see over the last 30 days that at peak, we're running 60 applications on UAT with a total of, 23 nodes that are running. But other times it's only running 10 nodes, and at other times it's only running 11 applications. So it's made quite a substantial, and it's a 4-hour idle time. So effectively, 4 hours after a QA stops testing an application, or 4 hours after a customer stops, testing their UAT, then it allows us to kind of slim things down. Which, the predominant thing is, yes, it actually allows us to not be just burning energy for the sake of it, but a nice side effect is it saved us 6 figures.
Good question.
So, yeah.
Not in Amazon, they were in a private hosting company previously.
How is it compared to like when you moved to Kubernetes cross-country?
More expensive.
Yeah, quite a lot more
But
expensive.
human time in terms of is a lot less.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the developer productivity has gone through the roof. I would say that cost comparison is hard because also we've doubled as a business since that time. So if with the volume of clients and the shape of work that we're doing is different. Also, I would say that we still have this sort of, if you look at our kind of typical node sizes, we still have almost like a server type mindset. So if I go to this NASWA application, for example, it's running on 3.5 gigs on a pod, but if you actually look at the nodes, we've got 2 node sizes. We've got effectively one that gives you around 8 gig of utilizable memory, and one that gives you 16 gigs. So what we end up with is a degree of fragmentation of the pods, and Kubernetes doesn't really have anything in it to optimize the pricing, right? To make it, So what we're moving to actually is moving to much bigger nodes, right? So that's one of the things that will make quite a difference. And we're still, as a business, paying per second pricing, which is also fundamentally a bit stupid.
1.5?
What's that?
15 minutes.
Yeah, we need to get the hammer down. All right, let's move on. So more Lucee powered goodness, I suppose. Just another example of where we use Lucee to build and build little applications. So this is who here has accidentally sent out an email to test that they didn't mean to send out to test. There we are. So this was a little application that implements a fake SMTP server. So all of our UAT and all of our development applications effectively get some credentials. So if I go to CFCamp, for example, I can see here some SMTP credentials. We load that into our application. And then any mail, it's fine. I mean, what can you do? You can send mail to a fake mailbox.
Email. Oh, yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Fill your boots. So all this does is it effectively allows us to, when we're working with customers, to allow them to test with real data so that they can really shake out any of the oddities and know that any mails are going to go.
So this is a Preside app. It was really written quite a long time ago, and I think it was written in a day.
Yeah.
Because we needed it. We were looking at obviously Mailcatcher does this, right? And there was another one that was trying to be public, but they couldn't take our money, so we couldn't use them. It was like, I'll just build it. And I know there's other products that do this. The benefit is that we can get clients on there, and they can have only access to their inboxes. Yep. But otherwise, obviously, use Mailcatcher. But yeah.
So one of the other things we were talking about was multilingual. So obviously we use I18N files within our projects. Preside as a platform supports typical properties files. But in any given application, you may have hundreds of extensions, custom properties that are being created for an individual application. And we needed a way to roll out new languages. So there was a new system built. This used to be branded Pretty, but it's had an upgrade, so it's lost its branding. So this is an application that effectively is kind of like a translation memory, where you essentially, as the build pipeline runs, Dom will explain.
So for each extension, every extension by default, part of the pipeline is to call into this and go, here's all my properties files, and this is my version. And it will create new versions if it's a new version. Otherwise, it'll just go, OK, have you got any new properties file for property keys for me to ingest and do stuff with and register them and put them in a queue for translation? And so that just is happening like constantly all the time. Doing its thing. And then if an application needs to be multilingual, so that Fidessa one, I think, does 8 languages, something like that. In our GitLab pipeline, we have a variable that says, I need these languages, please. And just before it, or as it's building the application before creating the Docker image, it pulls down the translations for all of the exact versions of those extensions and its own application from this server, puts them into properties files locally, and then off you go. So it kind of just does its thing. It's auto-translating using DeepL, which is a really pretty fantastic. Sasha put us onto that, better than Google Translate. Of course, we can then fix those. It'll kind of it'll allow us to use them, because if we waited to approve them all, we would never get anywhere, right? There's just too much, and we don't have the budget to hire that many human translators. But yeah, we can then, when people go, hey, that's not right, that's Danish for something rude, we can go and fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing, obviously, as well, that in certain, and Jan was talking about an example of this, you can have a straight translation where you'd want a different variant in different contexts as well. So
particularly when it's one-word translation.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So this is an example really of where we're building out a sort of a very straightforward application. Obviously, building out the data model is very straightforward. When you build out the data model and you get, this has got my data. Obviously, whenever you build a Preside object, you automatically get the sort of the drag and drop sort of rules filtering engine and things like that for free anyway. So that's quite a fun one. And we've got some examples there. So from a security and compliance standpoint, we went through the journey to do ISO 27001 and SOC 2, which was a bit of a learning curve. If anybody hasn't done it, or if anybody is thinking of doing it, I really recommend Vanta. I have a little referral code there, you get a discount. It's a fantastic platform for going through and managing the sort of compliance process. We learned a lot. I think technically we were in really good shape, but the sort of the process documentation was soul destroying to create. In terms of, obviously, it will integrate with things like Amazon. It integrates into your whole stack, and when you build your policies, your controls, and your tests, it automatically hooks into all your infrastructure and proves the things that you say you do. So this, for example, is testing that guard duty on Amazon is available as an IDS, and that's working. We did, however, want to have the ability to control certain security elements. So obviously, as Dom says, with mod security, we use that. And we have that sort of flowing in as part of our monitoring. We have various other alerts and things that we look for in terms of sort of shapes of stuff. But we wanted the ability to be able to, from an infrastructure management standpoint, block an IP across our entire infrastructure. And so that was built in here as a tool. So I can come in here and add a particular IP that's so SQL injection attacks from Panama that Dom's apparently dealt with. And what this does is...
So the Nginx controller, the Nginx ingress controller in Kubernetes, which for those not Kubernetes is kind of like the entry point for all traffic, and it kind of goes, okay, it's this domain. I can see I've got configuration that's going to this service inside of Kubernetes. That can have a block list of IPs. I mean, there's obviously a load of ways to do this, and you could do it at Cloudflare. Our issue is that all our clients have their own Cloudflare instance, so we don't have this kind of one place. And they do CNAME into like a Cloudflare CNAME that we have, but we can't do like all the firewall rules centrally there. So instead, we're doing that at the ingress level is one way to do it, and it works nicely. And again, Kubernetes API. Why I love Kubernetes is it's just an it's just a REST API, right?
Yeah. Additional things, so obviously for things like SOC 2, you need to be doing things like container scans, you need to be doing vulnerability tests. Obviously we have external testing partners that we work with, but we wanted the ability for constant kind of review. So we have container scanning that runs as part of our build pipeline.
Correct.
Yep. And we also have Pete Freitag's Fixinator that
you need to get on.
Yeah, we need to get that sorted. And then also the ability to run arbitrary OWASP ZAP pen tests as well through the platform and have those all feeding back in here. The thing that's interesting is if I go and look at, for example, another view. So if I go to secure operations and go to vulnerability alerts, and I go to high ones that require attention. I can, because it's just a preside application, I can obviously create any filters that I'm interested in, and then I can create an export of this data, save for later, and I can actually set myself up an email. So I can set myself up an email to watch certain things. So I can say, okay, this application's running, it's reporting into the data layer, and then obviously because it's just preside data, you can build whatever tooling that you want there in terms of notifying people. Any questions? Anything anybody'd like to see more of? Yep.
So actually, yeah, so we use SES. And Amazon services are great and all, right? But there's so many microservices that are like, if anybody who uses SES and had to set up, like, you got, like, I don't know how many things. It's like a lot of moving pieces. SQS, SNS, and like permissions you've got to like manually create for each of them to talk to each other. So we abstracted that out in our Preside app, right? So you go to Amazon SES, we can register a domain, and that then tells us the DNS entries we need to make. Somebody does that. And once that's done, we can then create app credentials. Just through here we go, yeah, I want this app that's one of our data manager registered applications is going to use this credential. It goes off, uses the Amazon API, creates all those bits for us, and then we have an SES extension, and we just plug the credentials in, and we're done.
Yeah.
And that works really nicely. And we've tried to use other services. We've used, probably shouldn't diss the company here, but we have used and no longer use MailJet and Mailgun. Yeah. Mailgun. Yeah.
For different reasons, right? Let's just put it that way. And then, so I think one of the things that's really interesting when you start building tooling around automating stuff is not just the time saving for developers. Obviously, there is a time saving for developers, but it also broadens the scope of who can do what. So when we have a new variant or version of software, and we want our QAs to go and test the latest version of something for a particular application. Those QAs can deploy, can upgrade, can do those things. So it's really improved efficiency there and meant that the scope of what developers have to spend their time doing is now more narrow, dealing with more sort of edge cases and things like that. The other thing from an infrastructure team standpoint, when there was an instance for the Royal Society of Public Health There's a town in the UK called Grimsby, and the BBC wrote an article that basically said that Grimsby really was grim, which upset the people of Grimsby no end. But also, it was a popular article on BBC, and the RC Path site, the Royal Society of Public Health site, got way more traffic than would be normal. So our ability to effectively come and scale up the application using our sort of orchestration. I don't like any of the magic stuff that Amazon does, where it will automatically scale up and automatically eat my wallet. So I like the idea of having some degree of control on that as well. There was a question here as well.
Yeah, in terms of architecture, like I imagine your CMS itself a separate container which sits on top of all that stuff, and in your CMS you're creating separate containers for user-facing websites. And those user-facing websites, is this only like one single Docker container without separation of front end and back end?
It's all in one container. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you have any front-end framework in front of it? And you mentioned that you are using, what I'm asking actually is, you mentioned that you are using Sentry. In case you are using any front-end framework, how you deal with that stuff in Request ID, where Sentry sits here on top of the main container, or you can separate Sentry into instances for each user-facing website, how that works.
That's a lot of questions.
That's yours.
We have a single Sentry server, and I don't even remember 5 minutes where that is. Anyway, it's somewhere. We have a Sentry VM, and that's centralized. In terms of the front-end framework, the front-end facing websites don't use one. It's like HTML and as little JavaScript as possible, really. The admin is just running Bootstrap and having discussions at PresideCon yesterday about how we can then kind of go, okay, and whether we want to, because it works, whether we want to go down a full-blown framework and with just getting the API data. Obviously, the advantages to that are obvious, but there's also limitations, like we kind of build more complexity that other people have to know about in order to work with it, and we've got a framework eyes on top of that framework. But yeah, no, we don't really have a full-blown front-end framework that we use. The other question, but yes, Sentry is centralized, so we don't have like individual instances of that, so that kind of simplifies things. I'm always impressed with how much data Sentry can just keep taking, and it never clears down as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. But we do have instances of applications being deployed where there is a front end that's consuming from a Preside data API. So Preside's object model, it doesn't use ORM, so it's all our own stuff. Benefit of that is that we're able to do some smart stuff like tenancy, just with annotation, multilingual with annotation as well. And one of the biggest features for us as a business is really twofold. One is this kind of rules engine, which is something that you get as a consequence of the relationships between the data objects. So if I come in here and let's do this. So if I said, for example, I want to see all people that have spent more than, and all this UI is all based on the shapes of data, so the fact that there's a one-to-many there in terms of type.
We're not ChatGPT, that one's not auto-generated, that expression.
But if I said,
cool.
for example, opened, so if the user has spent more than this, or they have received an email, and you can and an or and not an indent, which does the brackets. And this is based on any data that's in the system, based on the relationship. So as you expand out the data objects and you create the relationships, it automatically morphs effectively. So if we've got information on courses, or if we've got information on, if I go to our MIS system, for example, I have to think about what I'm doing here, because this is our live system. But if I go to projects, for example, or applications, because of this data layer, it's obviously, yes, it's a bespoke application, but it's very easy for me to be able to filter and say...
All those saved filters were once built using that advanced filter and then saved. So, yeah.
Exactly.
You could
Yeah.
if you look at a managed one there. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have two distinct types. So obviously you have these rules that you can build, and then you can use these rules anywhere. So you can use them in a workflow engine, you can use them for permissioning, you can use it for showing content. But we also have something called segmentation filters, which is hierarchical saved filters. So if you think
Materialized views. Yeah.
yeah, so if you think like materialized, does anyone know what materialized views are? So materialized views in Oracle, for example. So the ability to be able to say, I want to calculate this rule, and I want to calculate it every 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, hour. And then the nice thing about that is obviously the performance, but also to be able to go back the other way. So you can say, on the basis of this data record, which segments or which filters does this record feature in, which is quite nice to be able to go back the other way. Anyway, that's Mishi's waving, so. Yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean,
and a lot of the apps, I mean, this app doesn't have a user-facing website, right? It's just, oh no, this one does, but like,
Yeah.
a lot don't.
but for example, for Ready Membership, which is our membership platform, there will be CRM, event tech management, front-end website, shop. It's all one database, effectively. And the benefit of that is all the data being in one place means that you can do really good personalization and things like that. Cool. Thank you very much for your time.